In the email, I gave you the hard answers for the correct spreadsheet analysis. Most of you did a very good job, and you were at least close. And I could spot some common errors in your numbers and was able to provide you direct feedback. What I want to do is talk about some of the other subtleties of the case. For the most part, most of you had reasonable criteria and did a good job discussing them. What I want to do in this video is point out to you some of the subtleties of the case, just as a teaching point. You didn't have to raise any or all of these points. I just want to use this as an opportunity for you to see some more in the case. Several of you spotted the question about the angel, or the issue about the angel that says that, first of all, she's new to the area, so she's not going to have any deep contacts in the area, perhaps. And second, that she had earned her money in an industry different than the one that you were working in. None of these are killer issues by any stretch of the imagination, but they may limit the value that the investor can add beyond the initial check that she writes. And it didn't bother me whether you did or didn't say that. Some of you caveated how you viewed that and did that very, very well. Um, most of you picked up on the difference in valuation between options A and B, but like you saw, both down in the liquidation preference as well, and in the dividends for that matter, what really matters is doing a full computer modeling or a full spreadsheet modeling of what the returns are, because even though the liquidation preference is higher in option A, the total return to the entrepreneurs is actually higher in option A. So let's talk about some of the issues that uh, some of you raised well, and some that really didn't get raised. This whole idea of board participation. For many of you, or actually for most of you, control was a big issue, and I certainly understand and agree with that. And so there was a lot of analysis of the board. If you look at options A and B, how do they differ? In options A, you have basically three independent, defined as not company, not investor directors. And so, given that you have one company director and one investor director, you have those three people that are going to really have control if there's any disagreement between the entrepreneur and the investor. Some people would say that they are more comfortable under option A because they can lose, if you will, one independent director to the investor. They only have to convince two of the three to side with them. In option B, that independent director and the issue of a disagreement is everything. Because however they choose to vote is the way it's going to go, because the two company directors are predictably going to vote one way, the two investor directors are going to predictably vote another way, and they're going to be battling about that individual. So you could make a case that if you were very comfortable with that third individual, or that you were going to work very, very hard to be comfortable with that individual and to find someone that you were comfortable with as an entrepreneur, then you could prefer B. But generally speaking, most people are going to be comfortable more comfortable from an entrepreneur standpoint with A, because they feel like there's three people that they can work with, and it doesn't boil down to one. But again, that can be personality driven. Um, I want to put a footnote on this whole idea of control, though, and this idea of being voted out. I alluded in my written email to you setting up this case that we'd walk down this path with First Choice Pet Care, and we did. And it came down to a board fight. The CEO was very candid that he had driven the company into the ditch. He offered to resign as the CEO. He knew he wasn't the right guy anymore. The problem was basically he wanted to give up no stock. He wanted to say this company is going to need to be recapitalized. I've driven it into the ditch, but I don't think I should have to pay a price other than stepping down as the CEO. And we felt like his demands were unreasonable. And it came down to basically, there were some changes in the board. I don't want to bore you with all that, but it came down to a board vote as to what happened. And the independent directors, defined as not officers of the company, sided with the investors. And that was particularly interesting because the independent directors were personal friends with the entrepreneur. The entrepreneur had put them on the board, because they should vote with him, but they didn't, because they could see that the deal the entrepreneur was putting forward wasn't best. And so, as much as you want to feel like the entrepreneur is always all right and holy, and I understand that, There are times where you need to remove an entrepreneur, and it's these sorts of clauses that make it possible. One thing that only one of you touched on, and even then a very surface thing, and it actually would be one of my criteria personally, is how do these deals look if I significantly undershoot my revenue? One of the things that you know about startups is it's unlikely that they will outperform their numbers, and it's also unlikely that they will hit their numbers. What is most likely is that they will underperform their numbers. And when I model a deal for the angels, I go in and I cut the revenue in half. I cut the revenue by 3/4, and I say, what does it look like if these are what the numbers for the company looks like? None of you did really any detailed look at that. So this is where option A becomes pretty tough. Not only do they have a healthy liquidation preference, and some of you did talk about, well, one of you did talk about if it underperforms, that liquidation preference looks pretty good for the investors and not good at all for the entrepreneur. I put these redemption rights in here that are the sword of Damocles. This is the angel saying, I expect you to deliver, and if you don't deliver, then I'm not going to fire you necessarily, but there's going to be independent people on the board looking at what you're doing because obviously you've not done things right. So the question becomes, how badly does the company have to perform such that it can't buy her out at the end of 5 years? And so basically it takes 4.5 million in cash. How much cash do you have at the end of year 5 under option A? About $10.5 million. So you have plenty of cash to pay it off. It's too simplistic to say that if you hit 50% of your revenue numbers, you probably still just have enough, but it gives you a sense of if you miss your numbers by more than about 40%, you're going to be in danger if you can't sell the company of having the company not taken over, not have your stock taken away, just losing your position as the management team of the company or having your decisions overridden. So none of you talked about that. Personally, for me, I would have modeled all of these at half the numbers to see how does it look. I'll raise that issue again in just a minute. With option B, the major wrinkle was the idea that they're a national home builder as your partner. The good side is you figure they've got plenty of cash and plenty of contacts to help you, so that's all good. What's not good, though, is I would not for 1 second assume as the entrepreneur that their interests are aligned with mine. What's really probably their interest? That they keep this exclusive to them so they can sell more homes as the only home builder that can offer the solar shield system. So it's not a deal killer. But if it were me and I were to choose option B, I would state I want a specific written agreement that they will sign that says they will not demand exclusivity beyond year 1 in any way, shape, or form, because I don't think their interests are aligned with mine. Now, if they sign that, perfect. If they wouldn't, no deal with those folks. The dividends tripped some of you up very slightly in the calculation of the IRR because you didn't account for them. Not a big deal. Option C was popular with a lot of you. Even though you recognized you were leaving money on the table, you said, hey, control is worth it. And that's perfectly fine. And I understand that. But let's take a couple of looks at the durability of option C. First of all, what happens to option C if you miss your numbers? If you miss your numbers by very much at all, at the end of year 1, you're bankrupt because you're out of money. So you're trying to either scrape more friends and family money to throw into it, which certainly may be possible, or you're going out to achieve financing at this point, and it's going to be a little bit harder because you're just frankly more desperate, and when you're more desperate, you should expect more draconian terms. The other thing that bothers me about this is 4 people. It'd be different if there was 1 or 2 of us. 4 of us, if things don't go well, I do not for 1 second assume that all 4 of us are going to see the issues the same way and that we're all going to agree on a lot of things. I would expect, frankly, a lot of disagreement. Let me tell you specifically who I would worry about the most. I would worry that one of the 2 people who has taken the job and they are giving half their salary away to the other person that's working full time in the company and does not have a job, that after a year or 2, if things have not gone well, they would say, you know what? My stock is vested. I've got 8% of the company. You guys can just mail me the check when you do well, but I quit. I'm out, and I'm not giving any more money to you guys or gals. That's what I would worry about. And in a funny sort of way, with 4 entrepreneurs, having a board of directors with some independent people on it might be just what we would need, because we wouldn't agree with ourselves, and it would be great to have the insight of some outsiders. I don't say that to criticize anybody that said, I'm all in for option C. I'm saying that if you think about it, this is not probably a case of the Four Musketeers where it's all for one and one for all. And even if you feel that way, it's going to take a very good founders agreement to work all these things out, so that when it comes, probably not if it comes, but when it comes, that one of the founders wants to depart a year or two down the line, there's a good mechanism to do that. So much for Solar Shield. On to the last week of the course.